special installation of the Muses Educational Series. My name is Katie Hinson, and I'm the Education and Curatorial Assistant here at the Nashville Parthenon. And just kind of a little overview of what this series is. So it all started with the exhibit that we're currently sitting in now called The Muses by Christy Lee Rogers, which is an absolutely amazing underwater photography exhibit that we have. And when we were thinking about this exhibit as a whole, we were thinking, okay, what educational content could we do to kind of bring this to the whole community of Nashville? So we decided to do a workshop series based on each of the 9 muses. And for the muse of Euterpe, which is a muse of tragedy and also music, we had to think about, okay, how can we combine these two things into a great event? And we were so happy to find Dr. Nicole Richard Williams, a neurologic music therapist, to kind of bring us into the idea of how we can use music to work through some of the harder parts of our life. So I want to introduce Dr. Nicole Richard Williams to give her talk.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to dive in. I'll give you a little overview, and you might, just to address the elephant in the room, you notice there's all of these instruments over here. Yes, we will get to play them in a little bit, so just hang on and we'll get there. So a little bit about me. As Katie said, I'm Nicole Richard Williams. I teach at Belmont University. My students call me Dr. RW, so you can call me whatever in there makes sense for you. Assistant professor of music therapy. I'm a neurologic music therapist since 2016, and I've been board certified as a music therapist in general since 2014. My clinical background has been a lot with individuals on the autism spectrum, working with people with developmental disabilities, people recovering from stroke, older adults with dementia, trauma survivors, specifically children, and more. So just a little bit there. Can you all hear me okay, by the way? Yeah? Okay, excellent. I've had a little bit of my voice going in and out. I've been teaching all week, so hopefully it stays loud enough for the whole time. So with my clients, with my patients, typically I work on things like movement or cognition, like thought process, speech and language, or sometimes mental health goals. So just a little overview. Okay, so our plan for this evening, there's going to be kind of 3 parts. So part 1, we're going to briefly go over some of the roots of this intersection of tragedy and music. Where do we get this? We'll have some time to chat a little bit, talk with one another, and then I'm going to talk about modern day music therapy and some of the things that we as music therapists do to work with people who've experienced some sort of tragedy. And then we're just going to make some music together at the end. We're going to bring out the instruments and do some drumming. So that is the plan. If anyone has questions as we go, feel free to just interrupt me or raise your hand. I'm really happy to connect and chat as we move through this presentation. Really brief disclaimer, that text is small, but the content of this presentation is of an academic nature. It's not intended as medical advice or intervention, so I encourage you to, of course, talk to a doctor or a mental health professional for any health issues that you experience in general. Okay, so part 1, the roots of music therapy and tragedy, music and tragedy. If we look at the Oxford definition of just the word tragedy, there are 2 meanings that come up. So one is a tragic play, so play dealing with tragic events and having some sort of an unhappy ending, or a terrible event, right? This is maybe the word that we commonly think of as tragedy, right? A great event causing suffering, destruction, distress, like a serious accident, crime, natural catastrophe, etc. So we've got these 2 meanings. If we look at the root of the word tragedy, I thought this was kind of funny. Tragos means goat, and oide is song, so it actually is goat music. Is the word. So that's fun. So this is where it comes from. Is that early Greek tragedy, these plays, they were part of ritual worship of the Greek god Dionysus. And part of that ritual involved the sacrifice of goats, hence the word goat. And there was a lot of music in this festival, so hence the goat music. And so these tragic plays, these tragedies were part of the religious festivals, and they were meant to kind of tell the stories of the Greek gods and so on. Okay, so Aristotle had a really interesting take on these tragedies. He viewed them as an opportunity for the attendees, the people watching the plays, to kind of vicariously experience what was happening. I just tapped my mic. Hopefully that didn't make a loud bump for you guys. Okay. I'm a little bit Italian, so I kind of talk with my hands a bit, but anyways, we're all good. So when we have these tragic plays, you see these characters experiencing tragic events, and that the viewer would reflect and experience in their own lives on maybe similar experiences, and that they might have an experience of kind of emotional release or insight into their own life by viewing these plays, right? So he said that viewing tragedies could improve health and improve kind of integration as a human, which is really amazing when we consider kind of modern day music therapy, how some of these ideas are going to kind of carry over. So before we talk about music therapy, I just wanted to point out some kind of various examples of the intersection of music and tragedy in the world. So the first thing that I think of is funerals, right? That in many funerals we have music. Many ceremonies in my own faith tradition, we have one song called "On Eagle's Wings," and I've played at many funerals, and like 95% chance that song will be played at a funeral, because it's just become this kind of tradition. It's part of the experience. In Ireland, by the way, these examples are very random. I'm just kind of pulling random examples. In Ireland, they have what's called a wake. So they keep the body of the person who's died in the home for usually a day or two. And it's kind of an acknowledgement that if somebody has just died in your family, like, you just kind of need people to be with you. And so everyone is going to come and visit and be present and bring food. And sometimes there is music and dancing as part of the wake. And then back in the US, we have this tradition of, in New Orleans, jazz funerals. So when somebody dies, they would have like a procession and people playing jazz music to honor this person. And we could probably go on and have a whole talk on like music of funerals and around death in the world, right? This is a huge, huge part of what it means to be human, is singing and wailing when someone dies. Okay, some other examples. The Pontanima Choir. This is a choir. I was able to take a course from this guy here, Father Ivo Markovic. He's a Catholic Franciscan friar priest in Bosnia. And after the war there in the 1990s, he wanted to find a way to unite these groups that had been so traumatized by this war. So there were kind of three religious cultural groups. There was the Croatian Catholics, there were the Orthodox Serbians, and there was the Bosniak Muslims. And so he formed a choir and invited people from each of these groups to sing together, and they sang songs from each of the religious and cultural traditions. And there's the BBC link here. There's a quote where he talks about how at first people, this is his words, people couldn't sing the songs of their enemy at first because of an almost physical disgust that they would experience, right? These are people who were deeply, deeply traumatized. But that after a few months, that they all found all of the songs beautiful, and that they would go and they perform for all different groups. And they still exist, they still perform all over Bosnia. The word Pontanima, pont is like bridge, and anima is like spirit. So like soul, spirit or soul, so bridge of souls, or soul bridge is the meaning. So it's kind of beautiful. Another example is the Jerusalem Youth Chorus. They've existed since 2012 in Jerusalem, and it involves Israeli and Palestinian young people. And they get, similarly to the Pontanima Choir, they're singing songs from all of their religious and cultural traditions. And they're still in existence, they're still posting music. And I'll just read this quote from their website. They say, quote, "We don't all share the same opinions and have hard conversations about them every week, but we do share the same future no matter what the politicians say. in Jerusalem Youth Chorus, we have a rare chance to truly hear each other, and that's what makes the chorus a home for all of us. And then we have Taylor Swift. Right? She writes a lot of breakup songs, so we could say she's kind of processing her own tragedies, maybe? Yeah? So this brings us into this realm of songwriting, right? And I'll bring up another. Anybody heard of Nick Cave? No? Okay. I have this example because my husband's a huge fan. He's a musician who lost both of his sons tragically several years apart. And since 2016, he has been continuing to publish music, and people who've analyzed his music say that his kind of processing of his own tragedies is really clear in each successive album. And one recent review by a woman named Julie McGonigal, she wrote that to listen to Cave's Wild God album, this is his most recent album, so in 2024, to listen to this album is to feel lifted, carried away, even exultant. I came to this album with my own burden. My 15-year-old daughter had her life forever altered in a devastating accident last year, but somehow I lay it down with each listening. And I thought that quote was really beautiful because it reminds me of the Aristotle take at the beginning, right? Where this woman is looking at someone else's art around tragedy and is experiencing her own kind of emotional release through that. One more example. This is from Nashville. Has anyone heard of Operation Song? Yeah, so this happens in Tennessee, but it's a program that connects military veterans and their families with songwriters, professional songwriters and volunteers, and they help them write songs about their experiences. And the people who've been involved, there's a lot of beautiful stories about just the healing and the hope that can come from this. So lots of beautiful examples. Good. I'm glad that you're getting along with your neighbors. This is good because we're going to be playing music together in a few minutes. So lovely. Before we dive in, did anybody hear something in a group that you thought was really interesting and you want to kind of shout out? Not so much. Yeah.
I'll go stop. Our group had a really fair point about how music is used kind of in the moment to express a certain emotion like grief, and how that can be either pivot point, like when time moves on, looking back at that music or re-experiencing that music, how you can assess how that emotion was in the moment and how you can look back on it, as well as grief music. Music to express grief can be used to flow from joy to sadness to joy.
Yeah.
And experiencing tragedy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. No, it's almost like I remember my uncle talking about a song that he listened to in the car on his way to his dad's funeral, my grandfather's funeral, and how that song became like a musical snapshot of his emotion for that moment that he can look back on.
Beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, that's kind of
snapshot.
Yeah. So which can be really powerful then if that song comes on unexpectedly too, right? So, yeah, good. Anything else you want to shout out? Yeah.
One thing that we found really interesting was that even though we all have very different backgrounds and cultures, we all have like that song that's like the funeral cliche song.
Yeah.
And, like, it's an oldie goodie, but it's a cliche for a reason because it's that good.
Right.
So we were all talking about that.
Right.
Commonality.
Sure. Like if we find these songs that are somehow deeply meaningful and like, yes, they're a cliche, but also like we have to play them at this event because you have to. It's just what you do. Yeah. Yeah, it's meaningful. Cool. Anything else?
I think age can play a role here as you grow older. Older versus younger. We talk about, maybe we are older now, so I feel like older songs speak a lot to us.
Right.
We tend to go back and find a lot of comfort.
Yeah, there's some studies that the music that you listen to around the time of your early 20s, somehow the actual age of 23 comes up, that tends to be the music that stays with you for the rest of your life. So if you're in your early 20s, listen to the music you want to stick with you forever. It's kind of true. Exactly. All right. So can I share with you about music therapy, about my profession? All right. And I'm going to warn you, I'm going to get very nerdy. We're going to have like a picture of the brain and all of the things, so just stay with me. I was going to say too, there's a lot of detail and content in this section, so I don't feel like you're in university and you're going to be tested, because you're not. Just let yourself absorb whatever you think is interesting and let yourself kind of just enjoy whatever sticks out to you, okay? Okay, so modern music therapy as a profession, it's a credentialed profession. So to call yourself a music therapist, we might need some music therapy over here maybe. To call yourself a music therapist, to say that what you're doing is music therapy, you need a bachelor's degree, at least, in music therapy. You have to do an internship. You have to pass a board exam. Music therapists, the simplest way to explain it is we use music to work on non-musical goals. I kind of was mentioning this at the beginning. But some of these goals might be in the area of movement. So, something that's really common is the use of a rhythm, like steady rhythms for people with Parkinson's to work on gait. In terms of speech and language, a lot of my work has been with kids on the autism spectrum who were non-speaking, but through music and singing, they learned to speak very well. I had one mother who told me her son went from not speaking to then speaking, and she was like, now he won't stop talking. So, just good, I guess. And then mental health, of course. And so today, I'm really zeroing in on kind of that subset of mental health and emotion, right? We're talking about tragedy. So, so that's today. So let's kind of break apart tragedy a little bit and how this can impact us as humans. Tragedy, some sort of big tragic event, can cause when I'm working with children, we call big feelings, right? Kind of intense, overwhelming, kind of complex emotions sometimes. We need to figure out ways to process that. Experiencing tragedy can cause feelings of aloneness, right? When we experience some sort of suffering, it often feels like we're the only one going through, because really each human is unique and our experiences are unique. And so it can be easy to feel alone in what we're experiencing. There's also just like a stress that comes when there's some sort of tragedy, right? The word trauma would come up here, right? Like a tragedy can cause some sort of trauma. And the whole field of kind of trauma therapy is a whole other kind of level. That would be a whole other lecture. So I'm really going to focus on kind of 1, 2, and 3 here, which is related to kind of emotion and stress. I'm not going to talk a lot about trauma today, just so you know. Okay, so number 1, let's talk about emotion processing. So I promised a picture of the brain. Here's the brain. And I think I can use my mouse here. So, okay, so when we think about the brain, we've got this sort of outer area, the cerebral cortex. So this is a lot of what we think of as the rational brain and thinking and movement and different things like that. And then at the very bottom, we have the brainstem, which is the part that just like kind of keeps us breathing and heartbeat, right? And then in the middle, in this kind of border between the two areas, we have what's called the limbic system. Limbic means border. And this is where a lot of emotional processing happens. So I'm just going to point out a couple little key areas. So here's the amygdala. Amygdala is very connected to anger and anxiety, which is convenient because those all start with A. And there's no test, but if you were my students, this is the thing I would tell you to remember. Okay. Then there's the hippocampus, which is a really fun word. And this is involved in forming new memories. So if this is damaged, you cannot form new memories. Then there's the thalamus. So this is taking in some sensory information, also involved in planning and emotions. So these are all these kind of emotion areas, and they do a little bit more than what I'm saying, but it's just important to know that. Okay, another important area here that is not in the limbic system is the prefrontal cortex, which is this kind of front part. So it'd be the area of your brain right behind your forehead. Some of you are pointing to it right there. So this is important because our prefrontal cortex helps with emotion regulation. So It's the part of our brain where we can tell ourselves, something happens and we say, okay, whoa, don't react yet. Let's hold our temper. Let's count to 10. Or it's going to be okay. I've gone through this before, right? All of the things that we tell ourselves. We also inhibit our behavior there. Kind of moral thinking is there. Planning, problem solving, all these executive functioning. That's all in the prefrontal cortex, which is great. It's a very convenient part of the brain. But it is easily compromised by stress. So if we are in a high stress situation, our body shuts down our prefrontal cortex so that we can just sort of react and fight or flee. If we're sometimes really, really angry or really excited and you're sort of not thinking straight, also we're not able to use our prefrontal cortex to its optimal capacity. So there's this interesting relationship between our emotions and our kind of thinking brain here. Okay, so it turns out that music directly plays into the limbic system. So if you've ever been like in the grocery store and then a certain song comes on and it's like your song, and immediately you forget you're in the grocery store and you're kind of like, I wish I could dance right now, but it's not socially accessible, but you're kind of happy, That's because the music just went directly to your emotions and now you feel happy or sad or whatever that emotion happened to be with the song, right? And music also stimulates that prefrontal cortex and other brain areas. So music is kind of powerful here because it's not reliant on the brain to be working perfectly in order for music to be effective. It's touching all the areas of the brain and can then affect everything in kind of in an integrative way. So that's kind of the background of how things work. So let's go back to thinking about tragedy and emotions here. Are we following me so far? Are we okay? Okay, great. When we have emotions, right? Ideally, emotions are information. That's kind of what they're for. So I feel angry. It's telling me information that maybe something was unjust. Maybe there's an action I need to take. Or I'm sad. Maybe I need to pay attention to what is it that I've felt like I've lost? What is it that I need to do to connect socially with somebody or whatever it is, right? Emotions are information. But sometimes we can get stuck in our emotions, in a certain emotion, and then they become like a narrowing lens. So we start to see the entire world, our whole life, so we start to see ourselves and others sort of through the lens of this emotion. We think about this, the term seeing red, like if you're angry, right? That's kind of like this. Or looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, similar kind of idea, right? And there's a concept called mood-congruent memory recall. Tell me if you've experienced it. Well, maybe you don't have to tell me if you've experienced this. But this is when you're in a certain mood, and that mood becomes a lens, and now you can only remember events from your life that are congruent, that match with that mood. So I've definitely experienced this where I'm down, I'm like whatever, sad about something, frustrated, and I'm kind of stuck in that emotion. And I start thinking to myself, wow, like if I think back on my life, I can remember all of these terrible things, and I guess my life has always been terrible, and X, Y, this has always happened, and these good things have never happened. And I remember having a moment like this and complaining to my husband of X, Y, Z, this never happens. And he kind of looked at me and said, this happened last week to you. This good thing happened last week. And I had forgotten. I couldn't see, I could not access that memory in that moment, right? Our prefrontal cortex is like the, those machines where it grabs the toy, right? It's like the grabber for our memories. It goes and retrieves the memories. But if we're in a certain mood, it cannot access the memories of another emotion. So this is a problem, right? This can be tricky. And then if we're in that state and we don't realize it, our actions, we're not acting as our true self, right? We're acting out of a certain emotion, we're acting out of a certain lens, and it's not the fullness of who we could be, right? So here's how music therapy can help. There was a documentary that came out, I think about 10 years ago, called Alive Inside. Some of you may have seen a YouTube video that went around, but it was this gentleman named Henry, who you see him in a long-term care home, and he's completely out of it. People are trying to engage him and talk to him, and he's not responding. And then they give him headphones with like his music, and he like his eyes open, he lights up, and then he starts singing. They take the headphones off. People are able to have a coherent conversation with him. It's really, really beautiful. And this is this power that music can induce positive emotions, and it can actually stimulate the whole brain, like in this case. But music can induce emotions. Remember, it goes directly into that limbic system, and it can make us feel things that are outside of that lens that we might be stuck in, right? It can sort of give us more perspective. This is especially helpful for older adults with dementia because as the brain deteriorates with dementia, we lose that prefrontal cortex executive functioning. We kind of start to lose that first. So our emotion regulation skills, our ability to cognitively make sense of our experiences starts to deteriorate very quickly. But with music, we can help regulate emotions directly and bypass. We don't need to go through that cerebral cortex. So it's very effective. Music therapists also work with, I think I heard a couple of people talking about playlists, but we help people make playlists sometimes where we start with maybe songs that match their mood. Maybe it's their sad songs. Anybody like to listen to sad music when you're sad? Yeah, right. People are nodding. So you kind of have to start there, because if you're sad and then you put on a really happy song, sometimes that's just really annoying, right? So you kind of have to start where you're at, and then you can build towards that happier music, and you can build a playlist that can take you out of an emotional slump. So we help people do that sometimes. Again, we're using music to help provide the brain with a wider emotional context that reminds a person of more fully emotionally who they are, not just through the lens of that one negative emotion. Okay. Another thing that we can do with emotions, so we're still on this emotion topic, is we can bury them. So this is a good coping skill sometime, right? Sometimes we have to put the big feelings to the side because we have to deal with what's in front of us, and we're like, okay, I'm going to process that later. I need to do this thing right now. That's a good skill to have. We need to have that skill. The problem is when we try to keep it locked up in the box that's in another box, that's in the closet, that's in the hallway, that we've blocked off in the basement of it, if we try to keep it there forever. Because then we can delude ourselves, right? We can, in our mind, we can think, okay, I've processed this event, I've thought about it, and everything is fine, and I'm great, everything is great. But it's not honest with ourselves, right? The emotions are still there. They are still influencing us. We're just not aware as much, and we're not dealing with them, right? We're probably none of us are guilty of that. We've never experienced that ever. But eventually we might explode. We have this eruption of big feelings, or we can actually get sick, right? Holding emotions back can affect our physical health too. So again, music therapy can help because music, again, can give direct access to those emotions that we've tried to hide. And then bring them to the surface so we can process. I had an accidental experience of this many years ago. I had gone through like a breakup, and it was like kind of the breakup of my first sort of serious relationship. And for the first couple weeks, I was like amazed at how well I was doing, Like I was very fine. I had thought about things. I knew this was the right decision. Everything was fine. I was fine. Everything was great. And then I was on the bus and I was listening to like my iPod, and this song came on, and it was like some sort of song about a breakup and emotion, and it just opened the box of emotion that I was not dealing with. And all of a sudden I realized, I am not fine. I have not dealt with anything yet. I've just been surviving. And it was a gift, because then I could start to really deal with and process this experience. And then several months later, I met my husband, and he's sitting over there. So it all ended up really well. So that's kind of the power of music. So in a music therapy clinical context, we can't always find like the magic song that's going to unlock someone's emotions, right? But what we can do is something called clinical improvisation. So when we go to a therapist, we talk, We haven't necessarily planned what we're going to say, but we kind of talk through things. And maybe if talking isn't working in music therapy, what we do is we give the person an instrument that they don't necessarily need to know how to play. We can use very simple things like drums or whatever that anyone can just play. And we supportively make music with this person in a way to help them access those emotional parts of themselves so that we can bring things to the surface in order to process and talk. So this is a very common approach in our field. Another thing that we can help people do to access those deeper things is songwriting. And I have puppets here because this is often done with children, because children process their lives through play. And so I used to work with children, and they all had very difficult kind of childhood experiences, and we would bring up puppets, and we would make up story songs about the puppets. And inevitably, the children would start to make up stories about the puppets that were reflective of their own experiences. And it was a way for them to kind of, process, have mastery, and have a sense of control over their stories that they were trying to understand. It's very powerful. Okay, couple more things, and then we get to play drums, yeah? Okay. Talked about how tragedy can make us feel alone and isolated, right? Music can help with that too. There's several ways that it can help. So one is songs themselves as empathy. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're going through something, you feel like no one understands you, but you find this one artist or this song, and you realize, like, this person gets it. Like, I feel like this person gets it. So music therapists kind of use that where we'll play songs with clients that might relate to their experience, and we talk about the lyrics together. We listen to the music together. There's lots of research on this. People report feeling less alone when they hear songs that reflect what they're going through. I put the lyrics, this is Miley Cyrus, The Climb, on there. There was a little girl that I worked with years ago. She was, I think, around 8 years old, and she was in the oncology ward, and she requested to sing this song. And so we sang it with her, and it was incredible how you could see that this song was so meaningful, and Mom was in the room, and Mom was kind of tearing up that this song, some of the words, the struggles I'm facing, the chances I'm taking, sometimes might knock me down, but no, I'm not breaking, and so on. It was just this, you could just see, like, oh, this song is saying something about this experience in this moment. Any of you sing in choirs? Okay, yeah, a bunch of people. So singing together, this is another wonderful way that we can feel less alone. And turns out that singing together builds social bonds through oxytocin release. So oxytocin is that chemical, that bonding neurochemical that's released in when mothers are breastfeeding their infants. So it's that early childhood bonding, and during sex. So it is this human bonding chemical also present in choir singing. So if you're really good friends with your choir, this is why. And so music therapists, we sometimes have choirs to help build social connections between people who've experienced some difficulties. Lastly, tragic events can cause stress naturally. And so sometimes what we're doing is not directly working on like the emotions, but we're just trying to diminish the stress that's related. I've worked with one older adult who has dementia, and so a lot of what we're doing is trying to bring him into a positive emotional state, but sometimes he's not even ready for that. He's just too anxious. So first we have to relax him, and then he can engage in the emotional work, right? So sometimes we just need to calm ourselves down first. So music can be used to kind of structure progressive muscle relaxations or different kind of traditional relaxation and breathing exercises. But also drumming, turns out, lowers cortisol, which is a stress hormone. It also builds immune function, and there's a lot of amazing effects of just drumming. Turns out drumming and dancing, so any kind of music and movement where there's a steady beat, it increases empathy with the people and social connections around you. So it's a really, really powerful thing. Okay, in summary, this connection between the arts and tragedy is centuries old, as we've discussed. Tragic events can disrupt our emotional processing by overwhelming us with big emotions, which we sometimes stuff away. But music directly accesses emotional centers of the brain, and music therapy can help to process and express emotions by listening to music to improve mood or feel less alone, improvising or writing songs about our experiences, creating social support by singing with others, and reducing stress through music and movement and things like drumming. And a little plug for my profession, I think that music therapists are uniquely trained to assess emotional needs and kind of prescribe and deliver appropriate musical interventions for varying needs of people with all ages.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you're the first to know about all the exciting things happening at the Nashville Parthenon.